The air in the attic was thick and heavy, not merely with the accumulation of 90 years of dust, but with an oppressive, stubborn silence that seemed actively determined to conceal rather than merely ignore. Elara Vance felt the weight of it pressing against her sternum, a cold, unmistakable premonition that transcended simple melancholy. She had been assigned the thankless task of dissolving the final physical remnants of her great-aunt Evelyn's long and guarded life, a task meant to offer closure, but which instead felt like the reluctant opening of a grave. It wasn't the usual sentimental clutter that arrested her movement. It was the faint metallic scent underlying the mildew, the smell of something strictly forbidden. Her hand, guided by an intuition she didn't know she possessed, slid beneath the deep lip of a mahogany bureau drawer. There, secured by yellowed masking tape, was a small, heavy key, its brass dulled and bearing a single, trembling inscription etched into the bow, an isolated, chilling letter N. Elara had always been told the Vance family history was defined by its spectacular lack of drama, a lineage of industrious mediocrity characterized only by a sudden, inexplicable surge of modest prosperity in the late 1940s, a quiet, forgettable triumph of thrift and timing. Yet, the rusting iron box, secured deep within the burrow's secret compartment that this simple key unlocked, stood in stark, brutal contradiction to every comforting, internalized lie she had ever accepted about her ancestry. The weight of the box felt like condensed time, an anchor dragging the present back into the abyss of the past. Her hands trembled, not from effort, but from the sudden, terrifying certainty that she was about to desecrate a carefully constructed sanctuary of oblivion.
Elara was, ironically, an archivist by profession, accustomed to the dispassionate classification of forgotten lives. But sifting through Evelyn's chaotic legacy was proving to be an investigation rather than a classification. The contents of the iron box offered no trinkets, no jewelry, no sentimental photographs of sunlit picnics. Instead, nestled within layers of brittle, sulfur-scented tissue paper, lay a single thick ledger bound in scarred black leather. Its pages were alarmingly brittle, filled with an ornate, flowing script written in faded iron gall ink, a script that spoke of careful, obsessive documentation. Interspersed between the dense paragraphs were strange, unsettling photographs, stark, poorly developed images of people who shared Elara's high cheekbones and intense, deep-set eyes, but whose expressions were characterized by an unsettling emptiness, a chilling lack of spirit that seemed more exhaustion than despair. The ledger was dated, spanning the years 1937 to 1945. It meticulously documented movements, expenditures, coded shipments, and most disturbingly, sudden, catastrophic reversals of fortune. The entries detailed events that violently contradicted the known, sanitized Vance family narrative, particularly regarding the crucial transition years of the Second World War. The immediate conflict was not merely historical, but intensely personal. Who was the author, and why had this document been so ferociously concealed? Why did the meticulous, almost clinical entries suddenly cease on the date of October 14, 1945, leaving the remainder of the ledger's pages unnervingly blank? And who was Silas, mentioned repeatedly in the early pages, first as the keeper, then later in increasingly desperate, hastily scrawled entries as simply the problem? Driven by a mounting, sickening compulsion, Elara began her research, retreating into the safe solitude of her own apartment and the boundless resources of digital archives. She cross-referenced the names and dates within the ledger against census records, immigration documents, and archived wartime reports. The official records were clean, if sparse, but they contained troubling discrepancies. The sudden, robust expansion of the Vance family's import business immediately post-war was historically opaque. The ledger, however, hinted at a different source entirely, a rapid, illicit acquisition of assets involving secretive maritime routes and transactions that smelled strongly of human desperation and ethical rot. Elara attempted a pattern interrupt, a desperate attempt to seek normalization from the family elder. She tried to approach her father, Arthur Vance, with deliberate casualness,
mentioning the dusty boxes and the peculiar old-fashioned script. His reaction was far from casual. He had been quietly reading a newspaper. The rustle of the paper stopped entirely, replaced by a dense, alarming silence. His face, usually placid and non-committal, hardened into an expression of glacial fear and immediate fury. "Leave Evelyn's madness alone, Elara," he insisted, his voice a low, rough rumble she rarely heard. "It's the nonsense of a sick, lonely old woman, written to satisfy some imagined historical significance. Burn it, discard it. It has no relevance." His unnatural, visceral urgency was the confirmation Elara hadn't known she needed. The ledger was real. The secrecy was not the product of Evelyn's paranoia, but the protective shield of the entire Vance legacy. His desperate refusal to look at the book, to even entertain its existence, confirmed her obligation to look deeper. The development escalated. As she carefully peeled back the brittle leather lining of the back cover, Elara discovered a fragile, hand-drawn map tucked into a hidden recess. The map was crude, focusing on a remote stretch of coastline hundreds of miles away, marked simply with a single cryptic cross, and the coordinates matching the ledger's last recurring location, the estate on the coast. The chilling realization settled over her like a shroud. The silence surrounding the Vance origins was not mere historical discretion, it was an act of profound, deliberate erasure, a meticulous effort designed to protect the comfort and legitimacy of the present Vances from the brutality and moral filth of their true genesis. Her entire identity, the stability of her family name, had been carefully crafted by eliminating inconvenient, deadly truths. This was the central conflict. Her foundation was built on sand and blood. The climax arrived in the late hours of a sleepless night. Through painstaking effort, Elara finally cracked the ledger's internal code, realizing the complex numerical sequences weren't financial accounts, but a roster of names and dates, annotated with devastatingly cold observations. The ledger was not Evelyn's fanciful diary, it was Silas's precise accounting book. But the horror wasn't in the documentation of illicit trade or black market goods. It was in the final entries. Silas, the keeper, had apparently been the original architect of the wealth, accumulating assets through morally compromised means. But the last dated entry, October 14, 1945, revealed the devastating transaction that truly secured the Vance fortune. The notation detailed a final, cold-blooded maneuver, the systematic betrayal and calculated abandonment of Silas and several associates, the problems, to ensure the singular survival and prosperity of her revered great-grandfather, Thomas Vance. The family patriarch, whom history knew as a modest philanthropist and shrewd businessman, was in reality the architect of this darkness, sacrificing his partners to seize complete control of the ill-gotten gains. The simple letter N on the key, Elara now suspected, did not stand for a name, but for nemesis, or perhaps the cold weight of necessity that Thomas Vance had imposed upon his conscience. The map was the literal route to the location of that final defining betrayal, the estate. The payoff was immediate and devastating. The comfort of Elara's life, the stability of her existence, was predicated on calculated murder, betrayal, and generational silence. She held the truth, a malignant seed of knowledge that rendered her old life instantly obsolete. The past was not dead, it was merely sleeping, and she had just violently woken it. Elara sealed the ledger and the map in a secure travel bag. The intellectual exercise was over. She understood the history. Now she had to confront its geography. There was only one path forward, one way to discharge the terrible debt of knowledge she now carried, to confront the silence at its source, at the forgotten coastal estate, and uncover what truly happened in the desolate hours of October 14, 1945. She had to find out if the dark history of the Vance family was truly buried, or if something far worse lay waiting, still demanding payment.